Before we start this week's episode, I want to remind all of you that Midsummer Scream is this upcoming weekend in Long Beach, California. On Saturday, August 3rd, 2019, I'm producing the Grim Grinning Gala, which is their Haunted Mansion-themed Saturday night party, and includes a screening of the 2003 Haunted Mansion movie with live audio commentary by the film's producer Don Hahn and director Rob Minkoff. Also, on Sunday, August 4th, 2019, I'll be conducting a live episode of Disney Coast to Coast at Midsummer Scream with Kimberly J. Brown from the DCOM Halloween Town. For tickets and more info, visit midsummerscream.org. I hope to see you there.
You unlock this podcast with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of magic. A dimension of dreams. A dimension of Disney. You're moving into a realm of both wonder and fantasy, of news and ideas. You've just crossed over into Disney Coast to Coast.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePaoli, and today on the show, my good friend Aaron Wallace is joining me, the author of the Disney Thinking Fan Guides. Hello, and welcome back, Aaron. How's it going?
Hey, Jeff. I'm great, and thanks for having me back.
Of course, always happy to have you. And today, we're talking about something. Now, this past week, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, if you can believe it. And I wanted to have somebody on the show who has experienced every Tower of Terror, and you are among those lucky people. So, are you ready for this?
I'm so ready.
Okay, let's jump into that conversation right now.
It's time to dive into today's Disney dialogue.
Okay, now I gotta ask you, do you remember Disney MGM Studios before there was even a Tower of Terror or Sunset Boulevard?
Yeah, I for sure do. I mean, I have a lot of memories of being there often as a small kid, but, you know, when you're a kid, like, you don't have a map-wide sense of, like, the geography of the park, so I don't even know that, like, my early memories, I could go back to those and place, like, where Sunset Boulevard would have been. Do you know what I mean?
You know what's so interesting is, for me, I actually have a terrible sense of direction in general. I shouldn't say terrible, but not a great sense of direction, like if I'm in my car driving somewhere. But when it comes to theme parks, other than Disney's Animal Kingdom, I, like, can hold their geography in my mind so easily. And I do remember Disney MGM really well as a kid. It's just, I don't know, it just feels very natural to me. And I do remember it before Sunset Boulevard. And it's kind of hard to even think about because Sunset Boulevard just feels so much a part of that park now. It's hard to think that it once existed without it. But yeah, there was like a stage where the entrance was, and they did the Dick Tracy show there, which I love. And they did a lot of great stuff there. So it was a different park back in the day.
Yeah. You know what I do vividly remember is knowing that that was coming. And then, you know, when it first opened and going there for the first time when it was brand new and everyone in the park was, you know, rushing to get there and very excited about it.
I do certainly remember them building it. I remember being on a vacation and seeing the construction happening for the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. And it did open eventually. And you know, I was not among those people rushing toward that tower.
Same. It took me an embarrassing number of years before I was willing to ride it.
Oh man, I wish I knew my number because I would love to compare. But yeah, I definitely took at least 3 or 4 trips. And, you know, at that point in my life, I certainly was not going every year or even every other year. But it took a good amount of time before I was finally like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. I was terrified of this attraction. Like, yeah. Terrified. And I mean, that's what they wanted. They wanted an adult thrill ride. But it's so funny to think back on that now because I love this ride. I love the free fall sensation. I know some people it freaks them out. Interestingly enough, like when there's a slight bit of turbulence in an airplane, that's when I get really uneasy. But drop me from that thing up and down a bit, I'm fine. I'm like, we're all good. So yeah, how old do you think you were that first time then?
Oh, late college, probably.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're even later than me. I was probably like 16 is my guess. And I finally, the thing that got me to go, and this is what will always get me to go and try crazy attractions, is I had heard that there were some really good special effects in there. And like, when I first heard of it, I thought it was just this drop. I didn't realize they had created such a cool story and environment to it. And And when I heard that there was that, I was like, I have to just do this at least once.
Yeah.
And I finally did. And it was so worth it. And I think I got right back in line after. Were you freaked out, after, or were you like, let's do it again?
No, I was loving it. And in fact, I recorded my very first ride in binaural audio, like with the mics in my ears, so I would capture the whole first experience.
Oh, say that again? What did you do?
Binaural audio, so like the microphones you wear in your ears so that it records everything the way that you hear it.
No, but okay.
Yeah, so I wore those on the ride for my very first time riding it. And I thought it would be this thing of like me being terrified, but I was loving it. 10 seconds into the ride, even though it was scary, it was just such a great, overwhelming, it's like dramatic, like theatrically dramatic experience that was so wonderful.
I would still say to this day, it's one of absolutely the best attractions to come out of Walt Disney Imagineering. I love it. And it's a little bit aged, I will say. The last time I did it in Florida, I was like, the sound system could use, an update. And there's little things here and there that could use updates. But overall, I'm like, this just works. Beginning to end, storyline, it works. And it's awesome. So I love that about it. Do you have any like specific memories of things that shocked you or surprised you the first time that you went on this attraction that you just weren't expecting? Because we're all expecting the up and down, but what shocked you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, by the time I wrote it, I had heard so much about the fifth dimension, but I do not think I fully appreciated the extent to which it was going to be like a dark ride there for a little bit. You have one ride experience and then you enter a dark ride and your vehicle's moving. So I knew that there was going to be, that I would have time to prepare myself for the drop, but I just didn't know like what all was going to be involved in that. So I remember just being really surprised by the feeling that the ride kept going and going and going before there was a drop.
Great. Yeah. I think the thing that really shocked me was that great effect. It's really not a difficult effect, but I thought it was so beautifully convincing, was at the end of the fifth dimension scene where there's that split in the black, that light split in the black, and it separates from side to side. And then you can feel yourself leaving the air conditioning and going into like this heat, the heat of Florida, and you're about ready to do it, and it happens. And that was the moment that I was like, wow, this is awesome. And even I didn't even know that the elevator shaft moved forward at all. Like, I didn't know that much about the attraction before I went on, and that shocked me and freaked me out, because I honestly thought there would be no like hesitation. I thought you'd just keep moving forward and then just like drop immediately, as opposed to like get into position and then drop. And that freaked me out, especially since you don't see a track in the ground. You're just like, what is happening here? This is nuts.
Yeah. And there is no track in the ground, which I think is something that gets overlooked often. There's all this talk about trackless ride systems, trackless dark rides. They've done more of that, Disney has, overseas, but we haven't had so much of it here in the States, and everyone's kind of clamoring for a trackless dark ride system. But in Tower of Terror, we've kind of had one since 1994, which is cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I do wonder, do you remember back when this attraction was one drop? Because I feel like a lot of people don't, like younger people especially, are like, wait, it's like, what? There was one drop?
Yeah, I mean, that honestly might have been before I ever wrote it. But
I think it was for me as well. But I remember that being a thing. I remember the advertisements, it's just that one drop.
Yeah, well, there was this whole escalation over the years, right? Because I remember when it was like 2 drops, and then, what was it, like double the thrill, triple the thrill? Like they kept adding drops, and then there was a randomized drop, and then there were different ride profiles where each time you would get one of 4 different combinations of randomized drops. And so I feel like every few years they have found a way to plus that experience.
Yeah, which is kind of, simple and difficult at the same time, because it's like, how can you make adding more drops that much more exciting? But it's kind of a simple thing. You just do a little reprogramming and it's there. So it's incredible that it's lasted and been as popular as it has been for 25 years. It's, it's as classic, I think, as a Pirates of the Caribbean or Haunted Mansion.
Oh, 100%. And it stands alongside those comfortably and legitimately as one of the greatest attractions ever to come out of Walt Disney Imagineering.
Yeah, now something else that was once part of the attraction that a lot of people these days don't even believe, but do you remember when the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror did not have seat belts and was only a lap bar going across the entire row?
I don't think I remember that, no.
Okay, I do, and that honestly was a huge part of the reason why I was scared. I don't think I ever experienced it that way. I'm pretty sure the first time I did it, I had the seatbelt, but yeah, if you were in, it was basically a lap bar per row. So you were getting some serious airtime the first several years of the Tower of Terror.
Yeah, I can only imagine because you get quite a bit of airtime with those very tight seatbelts.
Yeah, and so, eventually they put in the seatbelts. My guess is it was like an OSHA thing or something that required them to do so, but it's pretty wild to think at one point that could be a special event now. No seatbelt Tower of Terror. Just hold on, guys. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, do you remember Summer Night-tastic at Walt Disney World? This was, I want to say like 2010, maybe.
It was 2010, like yeah. Because we had it here. I don't know if we did anything to the tower here, but we had Summer Night-tastic, and that was when we did major upgrades to Phantasmic 1.0. May you rest in peace. And we brought back history repeats itself. We brought back the Main Street Electrical Parade for Summer Night-tastic over to DCA. And then they added all the lighting effects in Pixie Hollow, I remember. That was a huge summer promotion.
It really was. Yeah, they did a lot of stuff. But one of the things they did was Tower of Terror at Disney's Hollywood Studios was sort of a simplifying of the ride, which sounds, I guess, unappealing. But as a limited time offering, it was just cool to experience the attraction in a different way, because when you entered that fifth dimension, everything was very dark. I mean, they had all of those sort of sci-fi effects that you usually see. The lights were all turned off. Nothing was being projected. You were really just in blackness that then turned into a star field. And then we had that sort of mirror effect that you guys in California had for so many years, where you would see yourselves, the guests in the elevator would see themselves in the mirror. You kind of see yourself disappearing, and then you would drop. And the drop sequence, if I recall, was simplified because it was more of just a free fall and not the randomized sequences, I think. Something like that.
So they added the mirror scene and then took it away for you guys?
Yeah, but it wasn't a full-fledged scene like it is for you guys, because that's in California, that was like a discrete showroom, like its own distinct showroom.
Yeah.
Whereas for us, that was projected just before the drop.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I do remember, I don't know if I'm making this up, but I feel like at one point at Disney California Adventure, they did it with the lights off. Like they shut off the lights in the audio. And I don't remember was that Night-tastic?
No, I was there with you. We did this together. It was, this was called, it was at the very end, right before they closed it to convert it to Mission Break.
That's right. It was after hours. Yeah. Or late checkout.
Late checkout, yeah. And I was there. It was me, you, Patrick Dougal, and our friend Marielle. And this is actually one of my favorite experiences of riding Tower of Terror in California ever. Just because, well, first of all, I knew it was going to be my last time riding it.
That's right. I remember waiting in a really long line with you. That's
so long. I mean, we probably waited 45 minutes to an hour outside before even getting into the lobby, and then it was a very long wait through the boiler room as well. But what was cool about that experience is when you walked into the lobby, they had performing there. What are they called? The Silver Lake Sisters?
I believe you're right. Oh, gosh. They still have a poster of these sisters in the ice cream shop / Starbucks at Disney California Adventure.
Yeah, well, that's what was so cool about it, is that from day one of DCA 2.0, there had been this poster hanging up inside the, what is it, Fiddler, Pfeiffer, whatever, Practical Pig Cafe. There was a poster advertising that the Silver Lake Sisters would perform nightly in, are they part of the Tip Top Club?
The Tip Top Club.
Yeah.
So they were down in the lobby for like a special performance.
So I was obsessed with the idea that this sort of manufactured lore of DCA was coming to life as a send-off for the Tower of Terror. So it was so cool that we got to see them performing, even though they weren't in the Tip Top Club. They were in the lobby. But still. And then my greatest memory of that night, Jeff, is waiting in the boiler room with you.
What did I do or say? I don't know. I don't remember.
At this point, we knew that a Guardians of the Galaxy overlay was coming, but we didn't really know what it was. And I just remember you pointing to different parts of the boiler room and being like, Chris Pratt's going to jump out of there and be like, hey guys, it's me, Chris Pratt.
Yeah, I do remember this. And frankly, I wasn't that far off. It's still the boiler room. So just saying. But yeah, no, it like you were saying with the Summer Nightastic thing, it was a simpler version of the attraction, which is kind of unappealing, but also cool if you've ridden it a billion times. I do feel bad for the people who, although I like the way they did it, because if I'm remembering correctly, that was only at nighttime that they did the late checkout. And during the day, it was still the normal.
Yes, that's correct. I remember we were waiting to get in line at a certain time. Yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. That way, if you have never ridden it the original way, you can still do that. I don't like it when, you don't have the option. Just because I always think about, what about those people who it's their first Disney vacation? And, that's always a bummer for them. But regardless, the special little touches are always fantastic and wonderful. It is interesting to me, though, how, they went through all that and did this big hoopla for, the Tower of Terror closing at Disney California Adventure, but then the Great Movie Ride closes and they're like, oh yeah, it's gone in a month. They don't really do much for it. I know they had a special event, but I don't know. They pick and choose which ones they're going to give a fond farewell to. And if you ask me, the Great Movie Ride is way more important than Disney California Adventure's Tower of Terror.
Oh, yeah.
The
Great Movie Ride deserved a lot more, including an announcement that we've changed our mind and it's going to stay open for good.
Oh gosh, I still miss it. I don't care how good Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway turns out. I will just never get over the fact that it's gone. Yeah. And especially, I would accept it more. I really wanted the Great Movie Restaurant. Yeah. I really just wanted them to take all those animatronics, put us in a rotating restaurant, basically where it's like the Carousel of Progress, but you're moving very slowly, and the scenes are on the outer rim, and you're seated on the inside. I don't know, something. I wanted that so bad.
Well, we have what was a perfectly good Planet Hollywood at Disney Springs in Walt Disney World. They remodeled that, made a mess of it, pulled out most of the Hollywood connections, and it would have been such a great opportunity to just port all of those ride elements over into the restaurant.
Rest in peace. I'm just never going to get over it. That's the reality. But in any case, we're talking about the original and the DCA one. Let's get into some dates real quickly. As I mentioned, it is the 25th anniversary of the original Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, which opened on July 22nd of 1994. At the time, of course, Disney's Hollywood Studios was called Disney MGM Studios, and it was a game changer for that park, I think, because, up until that point, what was the biggest attraction in that park? Probably the Great Movie. There was no thrill ride at Disney MGM.
I would say probably Star Tours was the biggest draw, the closest thing to an e-ticket.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, it was definitely a game changer for Disney's Hollywood Studios. And then many years later, on May 5th of 2004, the version in Disney California Adventure opened, like we were just talking about, in Hollywood Land there. And this basically had to happen because park attendance was so bad in that park the first few years that they're like, okay, we need an e-ticket. We need it fast. What are we going to do?
Yeah, but here's the thing about that, Jeff. And it is so reflective of late era Eisner philosophy, which is so that they open up California Adventure and they think it's going to be such a huge hit that they're going to have to build an e-ticket at Disneyland to bring people back to Disneyland because everyone's going to be obsessed with DCA.
Can I just say history repeats itself? Because we're going through this right now with Galaxy's Edge.
You're right. You're so right.
Yeah.
But at least they spent money on Galaxy's Edge, whereas they pinched every penny they could with DCA. And so, the park opens, nobody goes, and nobody's there in large part because they spent as little money as possible on the park. And so what is their solution? Oh, let's bring in a major e-ticket and do the cheapest version of it possible. So the Tower of Terror that they decide to build as the lifesaver for DCA is half the Tower of Terror that they built at Walt Disney World. It makes no sense, and it's so reflective of everything that was wrong with that park and with corporate leadership at the time.
I don't disagree with you, but I will say if you were a guest who hadn't experienced Walt Disney World's Tower of Terror, I still think you would love. I loved the Tower of Terror here. It was something I rode constantly. It definitely was not nearly as good as the original, even just architecturally from the exterior.
Yeah.
The one in Florida makes such an impression when you look at it. It's a beautiful building. The color of it's gorgeous. Just the design of it. I love everything about it. And the one at DCA never looked that good. It was I didn't care for the color of it. I still don't care for the way it looks. It's horrible as Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. I wholeheartedly believe it is the ugliest building Walt Disney Imagineering has ever designed.
Oh, absolutely. And this is what I call the Joe Rohde doctrine of justifiable ugliness. Does it make sense in the story that the building is ugly? Yes. Is that a good enough reason to ugly up the park? I think not. And you see that thing from everywhere in that park, from certain places in Disneyland, and from all over Greater Anaheim. You can see this ugly building, and it's unfortunate to say the least. But the thing about Tower of Terror's exterior in Florida is that it's gorgeous, as you said, but it's also ominous. Like, it's instantly spooky and foreboding when you see it. And there was some of that with the original exterior in California, but I think it always looked like a cleaner building, almost as if it were a hotel that were actually operating, as opposed to like a haunted hotel where this terrible thing had happened.
Yeah, it's, you know what I will say about the Tower of Terrors in general, though? They've become really cool projection surfaces. In this age of map projection everything, the towers seem to work out pretty well, I would say.
Well, what have they projected on it in California?
It's mostly been for like grand openings and stuff. I know during Monsters After Dark, they do some projection as far as like laser projections and stuff are concerned, but I also saw... Was there No, there was a Star Wars one, or was that was in Paris, which was the same exact tower. I feel like I've seen some map projection stuff there, but it was like for very special limited time stuff. And even in Florida, though, they'd use it at Christmas, and yes. I think it's a pretty good surface to project on.
Yeah, the surface works well. That show could use some work. I think the holiday projections, some of them are cool. Some of them are just very busy, very loud visually. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, the surface itself lends itself to projection mapping. So I think there's a lot of potential for the future.
Can I say something horrible, though? I'm a little bit over map projection.
Yeah.
It's too much. Like, it's everywhere.
Well, and it's being used for the same kind of thing everywhere, I think, is the problem. I mean, how many clip shows essentially do we have now that are just projections of well-known animated characters?
Yeah, now I do think there's going to be some map projection use in Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and I hope that that's used in a very different way. And I actually remember vividly the first time I ever saw map projection. Do you happen to remember your first experience with map projection? Because it blew my mind the first time I saw it.
Mine was on YouTube. Some big city was showing it off. I can't remember. What was yours?
Mine was many years ago on Broadway in the musical Young Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And there's a sequence, it's not a very good musical, but there's a sequence where one of the characters goes into a dream sequence. And so you see the set on stage and they project the set onto the set, but you can't tell that it's being projected on. It just looks like the set. And when he goes into his like dream sequence, the whole set starts to like wave in a very like dreamlike sequence you'd see in a movie. And I was just, at the time I didn't know what it was. Like I was like, okay, there's some sort of projection use happening here, but it blew my mind. And even to this day, I'd say that's always the moment when I'm most impressed by map projection is when it makes it look like the building is moving. I'm like, I know it's right there. I know it's not, but it so convincingly does it. And it's cool. Do you guys have, right now at Universal Hollywood, we have the Dark Arts show at Harry Potter projected on Hogwarts. Do you guys have that?
So we have a couple of different Hogwarts projection shows that cycle throughout the year. I don't know if there is one called Dark Arts, but there are like Dark Arts segments within our shows.
Okay, well, the Dark Arts one that here right now, they do a really good job with the whole making the building look like it's moving. And then we have this crazy thing going on with drones that gave me chills. Even though I knew it was coming, it still gave me chills. And I'm so angry that Disney didn't get to the drone game first. I don't really count the Disney Springs thing that happened. I mean, they had it, but it was more of a test than anything. Yeah. It drives me crazy. Anyway, let's go back to Disney California's Adventures, Tower of Terror real quickly. As we mentioned, there's that mirror scene, which I really love. It's kind of cool because, Mark Silverman had to go back and record more dialogue as Rod Serling because, there's segments that don't exist in the other. So that's kind of cool that I guess they plussed it in that way, right?
Well, it's cool that for all of California's deficits with that attraction. At least it did have one thing it could call its own, which is this mirror scene. I think of all the scenes, it's probably weakest, but it's cool.
Okay. I always liked that scene. I did not like, now the big difference was as I was talking about the Tower of Terror in Florida, I truly was shocked and amazed when the vehicle started moving forward that first time I did it. And it bums me out that like that effect didn't exist here because you immediately from the beginning get pushed back.
Right.
So you're already like not in an elevator shaft like in your mind. And it always bummed me out that was like the first thing to happen. I don't know. It was a weird choice.
And also to board at California, you have to walk through a hallway. Which is a real scene killer.
Yeah, so definitely shortcuts. All of those little things that we just mentioned, that was done for capacity. Apparently, they figured out a way to get more people in and out of the attraction that way. So I guess it makes sense in that sense, but not the best as far as show is concerned. But speaking of show, as we mentioned, it was taken over on January 3rd, 2017. The Tower of Terror closed to make way for Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, which I know you have experienced, and it's very much, it's the same ride with a new story and new effects, but I think really well done.
Oh, I agree. And listen, while it is narratively inferior, I think we can say, to Florida's version of the ride.
Sure.
If we can live in a world where we have the superior Tower of Terror somewhere else, then why not take this version that was kind of a half as good version and do something with it that maybe makes better use of the mechanics that are in place there? And I think that's what Mission Breakout is. There's enough of a story there that I can say like, okay, the experience that is happening like makes sense, right? I can understand what's happening. I can buy it. But the emphasis really is just on pulling you up and down as fast as possible, as many times as possible. And that is undeniably fun. And the attraction does a great job with that.
Yeah, people always like to ask which is better. And I always just say my answer is Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout is more fun than DCA's Tower of Terror, but Tower of Terror has a much better storyline and vibe to it, in my opinion. But Mission Breakout's a blast, and then they even have special Mission Breakouts during Halloween time. There's Mission Monsters After Dark, which is crazy as well. So it's a fun attraction. I would definitely tell you to ride it. I would say close your eyes whenever you walk by the building, if at all possible, and try not to stare at it for too long. Yeah, because it's ugly. I don't know if I've gotten that point across. It's ugly.
But you know when it is. But when you walk in the queue and you can no longer see the exterior, I think that moment is almost breathtaking, really. I mean, you really feel like you have just stepped into an exquisitely Imagineered space. There's a tremendous amount of detail. That character, what is his name? Not the curator, the
collector.
The collector. I think he is such a great character. He has this sort of like over-the-top 80s look about him. Do you know what I mean? Like a rocker, an 80s rocker.
Yeah,
or like David Bowie in The Labyrinth or something like that.
In fact, the statue looks like David Bowie.
Yeah.
So they have that gold statue right at the entrance, and it looks like David Bowie from Labyrinth or something.
Which just works really well because Guardians is very much like that whole franchise is very much an 80s throwback to begin with. And I mean, the story within the queue actually I think is pretty excellent. Works really well. It flows from one scene to the next. You've got Rocket sort of breaking in, introducing the next story thread. All of it works well until you get on the ride itself, and then the story kind of stops, and then it's just about having fun. And that's really my one critique of Mission Breakout.
But we do get Bradley Cooper reprising his best performance of all time as Rocket Raccoon. And why is it his best performance? Because you can't tell it's him. He disappears.
Wow. God. You're actually harder, you're harder on Bradley Cooper than you are on Julie Andrews.
I was never hard on Julie Andrews. You made that up in your head. Okay. Literally every episode you're on, that has to be brought up. Oh, man, hilarious. But in any case, Mission Breakout is fantastic. That is the one and only Tower of Terror to have closed since it's opened. So,
well, and here's a question. I mean, so we're talking about Mission Breakout in the course of this conversation about Tower of Terror. I mean, do you still think of it as a Tower of Terror?
Yeah, it's the same ride. It's the same ride. And this is becoming a trend. Jurassic World here at Universal Hollywood just reopened from the old Jurassic Park ride. I love it. It's fantastic. But I do kind of feel like they took a playbook from Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, because they're like, okay, they took essentially the same ride, threw a good chunk of change into it, but not an exorbitant amount. And now they have a new attraction. People don't talk about Mission Breakout as a rehashed Tower of Terror so much. It's a new attraction for them. And so, as cool as it is that was done, it does scare me a little, because the higher-ups at Disney are looking at that and being like, oh, we don't need to build new stuff anymore. We can just reskin stuff. And people look at it. The biggest offender of this is Pixar Pier. Yeah. Don't even get me going about Pixar Pier replacing Paradise Pier and them announcing it as if it's a new land. Oh gosh, nothing drove me more crazy. It is not a new land. It's new paint. That's it. Sorry. At least Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout and Jurassic World were done well. Ugh. Sorry, you got me angry there for a second.
I love it. Right in the middle of those two, I would say, is Frozen Ever After. Same kind of deal. Some money was spent on it, not to the extent that they spent on Mission Breakout. And so I think people think of it as a new ride. They don't talk about it as an overlay of Maelstrom. But certainly they didn't go all out with it either.
I really like that ride. Do you like that?
I like it. I think Frozen deserves better. And here's the thing, like, as theme park fans, it is not enough, I don't think, to just ask, like, the experience that we got, does it work or is it good? I mean, you always have to think about what could it have been? What should it have been? You and I talked about this with PhilharMagic in DCA. If that was your only experience of PhilharMagic, you'd think like, hey, this is pretty cool, but how sad to not ever have, if we'd never gotten the better PhilharMagic that we have in Magic Kingdom. And so it's the same thing. Like, the Frozen Ever After that we have in Epcot is the equivalent of DCA's Mickey's PhilharMagic. It's fine, it works, but we don't know any better. We don't know the ride that could have been built, that should have been built. Frozen is like a massive success, and it is to a new generation of children what, The Little Mermaid was for our generation. It deserves its own full-fledged e-ticket attraction, and Frozen Ever After ain't it.
Now I made you angry. Now here's the real question, though. So they are building Frozen attractions and lands overseas, but I believe in a lot of cases I've heard it's gonna basically be Frozen Ever After. Have you heard otherwise? Are they building new Frozen attractions?
I mean, is it any surprise that that's exactly what they would do?
Yeah, that's disappointing more than anything. Like, that's a bit crazy to me. Ugh. Oh, Disney. Do better. I just tweeted about this, I think just yesterday, something about, it makes me sad to think of all of the attractions, new phenomenal attractions that were canceled due to bad box office. And, just because the box office isn't great doesn't mean the attraction won't be phenomenal. And it saddens me to think the things we just never got because of it. But man, we're going on crazy tangents here, but they're all somehow related, it seems, to the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, because it's been such a staple of the Disney parks for so long. But in any case, that was the second one, Disney California Adventure. Then the one that I know the least about, but you have experienced, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it. This is at Tokyo Disney Sea. It opened on September 22nd of 2006, and this is the only version of the attraction that was not themed to the Twilight Zone, because that culture does not know what the Twilight Zone is. So it got its own original story. I believe it's called the Hightower Hotel. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So it's really... it's the same ride mechanism as you had in California, but otherwise a completely original story that really has nothing to do with the Tower of Terror as we know it here in the States. So you find this in a land at Tokyo Disney Sea called the American Waterfront. And it's basically Tokyo's little miniature version of America. And itself, it's divided into two halves. There's one that's...
How'd they do? Is it like America?
Well, it's like the parts of America that it purports to be. So there's one half that's Cape Cod, and it feels very sort of like classically, quintessentially Cape Cod.
Okay.
I say that never having been to Cape Cod, but I watched a lot of Murder, She Wrote, and it's that kind of area, and it looks like that.
All right.
And then the other half is New York Harbor. I have been there, and yeah, it has that feel. And so that is where you find the Hightower Hotel. So that's what's interesting. It's not even set in Hollywood or in California. It's set in New York. And as you walk up to the hotel, which, by the way, gorgeous, totally different architectural style than what we have here in the States. And it looks very clean, very pristine. It looks like a hotel that you actually could check into. But as you approach the building, you learn from signage outside that the hotel was built, conceived by this guy named Harrison Hightower. His exact relationship to the hotel, I'm not sure about because it's all in Japanese, right? So as an English speaker, you're picking up on visual cues. But it's clear that I guess he built the hotel and died there mysteriously some time ago. And as a result of this mysterious death, the hotel had been closed and was set to be demolished. But there's some sort of, I guess, like New York Architectural Preservation Society that has stepped in, fought to have it saved as like a historical landmark, and I guess to raise funding or something like that, they have reopened it to the public for tours. And lucky us, we get to be there, I guess, for the first day of touring. And the reason that people are coming to tour the hotel is because there is this haunted mystery associated with it. I guess for generations, people have wondered, how did this famous guy die here? So you walk into the building, and it's not like the lobby we have here. It's far less detailed. There are these big open spaces, but up on the ceiling are these gorgeous paintings of this character, Harrison Hightower, fictional guy, going around the world and stealing artifacts from various cultures. And it's what's very creative about it is that the paintings they depict this guy being horrible, right? Like he's stealing from native populations, but you also believe that he would be proud of the paintings because they show him in a very like victorious posture. So it's a fine line that the Imagineers would had to have walked, right, to make it believable that this guy would paint, he would display paintings of him doing horrible things. Mm-hmm. But anyway, what's amazing is that without speaking a word of English or a word of Japanese, you fully understand the entire experience just from the visual cues, the paintings. You learn so much about this guy's character just from looking around.
Interesting. Do you know if there's an English option?
So a lot of attractions there do offer that. To my knowledge, there's not one available for this particular attraction. At least nothing was offered to us when we walked in. I mean, usually what would happen is, the cast members would see like, oh, here's a white guy. And they would come up and say like, hey, do you want, an English cue card? Or sometimes it would be like a little electronic box with the translator. But there was nothing like that for this. There are YouTube videos, however, where there are English captions put in over ride-through videos. So there's always that.
Now, when you're going into the drop, are you, number one, in an elevator, and what causes the drop? Does that fit into the story well?
Yeah.
From what you could tell anyway? So
when you leave the lobby, you walk into Harrison Hightower's office, which is the equivalent of the library or study that we have in our Tower of Terror. But instead of there being a TV set, there's a stained glass window and a gramophone. And so a cast member walks up, turns on the gramophone, and what we're hearing is the audio of the press conference that Harrison Hightower gave on his final day, the day he died. And he's talking about this rare artifact. It looks kind of like a tiki idol, but I think it's supposed to have come from Africa, that he found. And he's sort of bragging about how he stole it without being caught. And one of the reporters, I guess, says something like, well, hey, isn't that supposed to be haunted? And I guess he's like, ha! I think he like puts out a cigar on the idol or something to show that he's not scared of it being haunted. But then we hear from his ghost. Like his ghost kind of interrupts his presentation, and all the lights go out and everything turns like a glowing green. And then he's warning us from beyond the grave, like, I was wrong. I made fun of this curse, but the curse is real. I paid the price. Leave now. Don't continue with the tour. The building is haunted. And then in one of maybe the best Imagineering visual effects ever, the tiki god who was sitting on a shelf when we walked in disappears. And I mean, this thing was sitting there and you just see it disappear before your eyes. And I don't even know how they did it, but it's very, very impressive. And so the tour continues on. We leave from that room and we enter the elevator. But the idea is that we're taking the elevator because it's part of the tour.
Okay. So, I mean, this is a tough question, but is the genius of that equal to the genius of the original Twilight Zone Tower of Terror? Are they comparable? Is one better than the other?
Oh, no. Listen, so many people come back from Tokyo saying that the Tokyo Tower is the best version of Tower of Terror ever, like hands down. And I feel that it's not even close. Florida's is so much better than Tokyo's, and I'll tell you why.
Interesting.
First, and listen, there are a lot of great things about Tokyo's, and I love that there is just a different version of it, right? Like variety is the spice of life.
Sure.
I love it. But if we have to pick one that's like the definitive Tower of Terror, first, Tokyo has the smaller ride system that California and Paris have, right? So you don't have any sort of fifth dimension. There's no trackless dark ride element in theirs. Secondly, while they do justify why you're in the elevator, I don't know that the justification works as well as Tower of Terrors, where they're just sort of straightforward about it. Like, you're entering an episode of the Twilight Zone, you know? Like, this thing happened on this elevator, and now you're going to experience it. It seems a little bit of a stretch that we would take a secondary elevator as part of a tour, you know? But I guess it works, but it just doesn't work.
It's kind of what we're doing in Mission Breakout, right? Like, we're going to see the collection on a tour, and we're getting into a gantry lift. So it's essentially the same thing. And not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying it's not, new.
Yeah, well, and by the way, Mission Breakout is essentially the story of Tokyo's Tower of Terror, right? It's this eccentric collector who has, built a museum, sort of, and you're going to tour it.
Now, that's really interesting. I've never made that connection. I've never heard anybody make that connection. Had you thought of that before?
Yeah. When I first walked into Mission Breakout, my thought was, this feels very much like a Society of Explorers and Adventurers type experience.
Sure.
Which Tokyo's Tower of Terror is part of that whole thing. And so that's sort of how I made the connection, because it feels like they just sort of, imported that same story idea.
Now, after that one, history sort of repeated itself, because on December 22nd, 2007, the Disneyland Paris Resort over at its Walt Disney Studios Park opened a Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. But very much like you were saying, how DCA was a park that was struggling with attendance, and they decided to take this great e-ticket attraction and make the cheapest version possible. They did literally the same exact thing at the Walt Disney Studios Park, which was suffering from attendance and, across all boards is a very cheap Disney park. So that's semi-interesting that they literally did the same thing again. Yeah. So that happened in 2007.
Yeah. And I should say, you said at the beginning that I've experienced all the versions of Tower of Terror. That's technically true only because Paris is identical to the one in California Adventure. I haven't actually been to Paris myself, but from what I understand, it's exactly the same experience as California's, though I do believe some changes are on the way, right?
Yes, September 28th of this year, they said, at Disneyland Paris, we regularly want to reinvent the guest experience to continue to surprise them and bring them new thrills and emotions. We look forward to unveiling the new drop sequences and effects at the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, which will create memorable and terrifying memories for guests of the Hollywood Tower Hotel. So they're doing they're really promoting it like it's some major upgrades. I hope it is. I do feel like Disney's gotten a little bit of a tendency lately of overpromising. But this is something that it's coming for the Halloween season, but staying. So it's not going away. It's just premiering during the Halloween season. This is exciting to me. And also kind of a bummer, because I'm like, well, whatever they're doing, that means they could have done it at DCA, yet we're not going to get to experience that. So
that's true.
But it's kind of cool that they're plussing it. It's been there for a while. It's been there since 2007, so it could use a plus. It's, from what I understand, the biggest attraction at that park. So it's a good thing they're taking care of it. I do know with this one, with the push of a button, it's very easy to turn it to English if you want to experience that. I got to say, if I were to go, though, I would totally experience it in French, just because, I know it all. So might as well get that different new experience, even if I don't know what they're saying. But I think that would be kind of cool. And yeah, they do use this one as a projection surface quite a bit, I know, for a lot of special events. And it's kind of the icon of that park, I would say, at this point.
Yeah, well, what else would it be?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so it's, those are the 4 Twilight Zone Tower of Terrors. I gotta ask you, though, do you think, there's been rumors going on for a long time, do you think that the Twilight Zone will be removed from the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror?
I hope not. I mean, that's just what I would say. I could see that it might happen. Bob Iger has very little interest in properties he doesn't own, though who knows, he might just try to buy the Twilight Zone. You never know.
That's true. That honestly,
CBS.
that I would like them to buy the Twilight Zone. That'd be interesting, just to keep that in the family. But at the same time, Iger's on his way out, so I don't think he cares.
That's true. So, I mean, does it bother you? Because I know you're big into consistency and branding.
Yes, it does.
So it bothers you
Yes.
that there's a non-Disney property.
Yeah, especially since it's like back in the day when Great Movie Ride was there was so much non-Disney property, and American Idol was there, which wasn't Disney at the time. And like Disney's Hollywood Studios was full of non-Disney IP. So it was just one among many, but now it being the one, it does bother me. Now, I love the Twilight Zone aspect of it. I would be sad to see it go, but I will say the TV movie that they made of the Twilight Zone, of the Tower of Terror, has 0 Twilight Zone in it, and I don't miss it, if that makes sense. You know, I think it was, what year is that? Like 1997.
Right.
The TV Wonderful World of Disney movie. I don't miss it from that movie. Do you?
No, I totally agree. And I think that as much as I do like those few little elements of the Twilight Zone that we get in the attraction, Tower of Terror is not fundamentally an IP experience. Like, the IP is Disney's. It's almost as if it's just sponsored by the Twilight Zone, you know? And so I think, what would it take to transform that attraction to a non-CBS licensed attraction? It wouldn't take that much. You'd take out the Rod Serling stuff, reshoot a few things, maybe some of the set dressing would change a little bit to take out like a few Easter eggs, and you'd rescore it. But it wouldn't fundamentally change the attraction experience, and the heart of that story would hold up. And you see that in the movie, which actually for a 1997 TV movie is pretty good.
Yeah, I will say that if they were going to do that, I don't want to say I want an all new story, but I feel like it would need to be changed enough to justify the removal of the Twilight Zone. If it was just like, hey, we're taking out all Twilight Zone nods, then it's like, oh, we're just kind of cheapening the attraction. But if they're like, we're reimagining the attraction, then it would give us a quote unquote reason, even though the reason will be we don't want to pay for the rights anymore.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's kind of a rock and a hard place.
I mean, that attraction works in large part because it is a pastiche of a certain genre, right? Like a 1950s or 40s sort of a throwback horror, sci-fi, black and white type experience where everyone has like that mid-Atlantic accent. It is a pastiche of that. So you can have that pastiche without any sort of intellectual property tie-in. And yeah, they could kind of go back to the drawing board and say, let's take the story we have and embellish it a little bit to compensate for the lack of the Twilight Zone. But that actually goes back to what you asked me earlier about why Tokyo's doesn't make the same impact. And I think the genre has a lot to do with it. Tokyo's, yes, is certainly spooky, but the primary genre there is like an adventure genre. It feels more like an Indiana Jones type experience.
Sure.
And I think when you talk about a free fall, I mean, that ride effect can work in any genre, but it works best in the horror genre because I think no ride effect more closely approximates like the emotional feeling of fear than a straight up free fall. And so it just really, it's like a perfect marriage of genre and physical sensation. It makes a stronger emotional impact too, because when you're in the Tower of Terror queue for the first time, everything there is designed to psych you out. And you aren't so much psyched out in the queue of Tokyo's because it's actually kind of funny. Like if anybody's watched Parks and Rec and you've ever seen those those Native American portraits in the city hall that depict these horribly violent scenes, but yet the town is so proud of the paintings. It's that kind of comedy that's going on in the queue. So it just doesn't make the same emotional impact. You don't bond with the attraction that way because you aren't really all that scared until you're falling.
Interesting. Now, that brought up an idea or a thought that I've read before, but to be completely fair here, I am not enough of a Twilight Zone aficionado to have a real opinion about this, but I have read from Twilight Zone fans that say the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror is a very bad example of a Twilight Zone episode. It is not. It's funny because I think people think Twilight Zone and think scary, spooky, but I don't think a majority of their episodes really are scary, spooky. They're often weird, but horror is not the word I would use. So it is interesting.
See, I don't know if I agree with that. And look, I haven't seen every episode of the Twilight Zone, but I've seen my fair share, and I feel like it is true that it's not a horror in the sense that there aren't jump scares and it's not a slasher film, but like in the true sense of horror where these films are supposed to be speaking to like society's deepest, most hidden fears or anxieties, right? Like I think that is what the original Twilight Zone does. So it's like pure horror in a classical sense, and that it's tapping into like these latent fears or suspicions. And you know, I've heard this argument before that Florida's Tower of Terror is not a good representation of the Twilight Zone TV show because its episodes were often morality tales. But like they weren't all morality tales, right? Like some of the episodes are, some of them aren't. So I don't know. I mean, to me, when I watch an episode of the Twilight Zone, I feel unsettled. I feel like I'm in the presence of something like supernatural or otherworldly, and I get that same feeling on the ride.
Yeah, it would be interesting if Disney bought CBS and was like, okay, Jordan Peele's going to be in the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror now. I feel like, please don't. Nothing against Jordan Peele. I just don't want that update to the attraction. Yeah. I will say, though, if they were going to remove the Twilight Zone thing and, you know, do their original story, you know what I would love to see in place of the Fifth Dimension in Florida is I would love to visit the Tip Top Club. I think that would be awesome. To finally get to the Tip Top Club. We never have. The only time we ever see it is in that 1997 TV movie. Otherwise, we never get there. I can't believe Disney hasn't done something with the Tip Top Club. I feel like that's a special event begging to exist. So
okay, does it need to be at the top of the hotel, though, or they can just build like a first floor experience somewhere?
I think you should go into a fake elevator and just, you know, walk out the other side and be at the Tip Top Club. I think if they're going to do it, that's how they should do it. Yeah.
And that's another thing about the Tower of Terror is just the atmosphere is so wonderful. I mean, I could totally just sit in that lounge and like have drinks with friends or have, you know, a conversation all night long, just hanging out there. And that's what I loved about the Silver Lake Sisters performing in the lobby is that it's just a kind of like chill place that you could spend a whole evening.
It's a cool, it's one of the greatest attractions, as we mentioned. I really hope that the Tower of Terror never leaves Disney's Hollywood Studios. I know there's been lots of rumors about, will that become Guardians of the Galaxy or will they do something Marvel with it or whatever? I really hope not. I think it is the icon of that park. They change their icon back and forth constantly, but like for a long time, that's been the icon of that park. So I certainly hope it's not in any real danger, but nothing surprises me these days, so I don't know.
If the Great Movie Ride can close on 2 weeks' notice, anything can.
That's so true, and it's so sad. By the way, the D23 Expo is coming up, and that was 2 years ago. That basically the announcement at the Expo for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway closed the Great Movie Ride. So
yep, and same thing with the Guardians ride for Epcot, closed Ellen's Energy Adventure. And let me tell you what attraction I'm nervous for at this year's Expo, Spaceship Earth.
What? Because we know that it's going to reopen as Spaceship Earth, right?
Well,
like, do you think it's going to be reopened as something that's not Spaceship Earth?
Do we know for sure that it'll reopen as Spaceship Earth?
It better reopen as Spaceship Earth. If that becomes a Marvel attraction, first of all, will you join me in booing Bob Chapek as he takes the stage?
Oh, I booed Bob Chapek about something at the last Expo. So yeah, I will gladly join you in that. Listen.
That man.
We know that Spaceship Earth is going to close for a very long time. We know that Epcot is in the midst of this fundamental transformation, and we know that bringing aboard IP and more family-friendly attractions is a big part of that's Bob Chapek's whole impetus, right? So why wouldn't they make some sort of drastic change to Spaceship Earth? It just feels like that's probably what we can expect, but who knows?
You're giving me nightmares. I don't like this. I never even. It was just an assumption we're gonna get an updated Spaceship Earth. I never thought they'd put anything else in that space.
Jeff,
that would
it's
be
closing for a very long time. Like, we're not talking about switching out set pieces. We're talking about structural changes to the track. What else could need that much time?
Do you think that there's a chance that it's not going to be that ride system?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good chance. What else could they be doing that would require that kind of a long-term closure?
It's 2 years, right?
Yeah.
2-year closure?
Yeah.
Oh, no. You just ruined my day. Thanks for that, Aaron.
I mean, it's probably going to be like a Doctor Strange roller coaster or something.
Oh, man. Anyway, guys, I do want to mention for the 25th anniversary of the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror over in Florida, they did create a new animated magic shot in addition to their already attraction photo and their attraction video. So this is an attraction that keeps getting plussed in little ways. I hope it always continues to get plussed. I love it. And now all I'm thinking about is the future of Spaceship Earth. Oh, my gosh. You know what, tangent for a second, because now I'm thinking about Chapek. Mm-hmm. The best thing to come out of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge not doing well at Disneyland is, to me, that was the nail in the coffin for him taking over the company.
You think so?
There's no way. I don't think there's any way they'll give it to him now. No way.
Jeff.
Dude, talk about the most epic failure. That is a huge failure. I know we're not really talking about it, but Galaxy's Edge is a failure. When you think about the fact that all we've been talking about for years now, this was going to be the biggest summer of all time for Disneyland. And I'm not even saying it's not the biggest or it's stayed the same as it's been in previous summers, which is busy. It's been the lowest summer attendance in a long time, and there hasn't been any sort of, natural disaster or historical horrible moment making this happen.
Yeah, and Disney claims that this was all by design, but here's what gives the lie to that, which is that they're pulling all the blackout dates. And if this was all by design, those blackout dates would not be coming back online. So, yeah, listen, though, Jeff, if you were right that this keeps Chapek from taking over from Iger, then thank God for that failure. Like, that's divine intervention right there.
Yeah, I don't think he has a shot anymore. I think he'll end up leaving the company because I think it'll go to somebody else. I really hope it goes to an outsider. I really hope they bring 2 people in for it. But
Kathleen Kennedy?
I was gonna, the 2 that I think, is it Feige? What's his first name? Kevin Feige? Yeah. Or Kathleen Kennedy, I think maybe.
Listen, here's all I want for Disney's next leader. I want it to be someone who comes from a creative background, someone who comes from entertainment. So Bob Iger came from television. Michael Eisner came from film, right, from Paramount.
Paramount, yep.
Bob Chapek comes from consumer products, from merchandising. I mean, he's like the corporatiest of corporate suits. And that's what worries me. We've never had someone with that background or someone without an entertainment background leading the Walt Disney Company. And it scares me to think what the company might look like if we do get that.
Equally as bad a problem for me is, like it or not, the Walt Disney Company has always been run by somebody who is a personality. And I'm not saying like Bob Iger is... I wouldn't say he's super personable, but I like the guy.
Yeah.
I'd have lunch with him, even if I disagree with him. Bob Chapek, that video that came out of his smarmy remark about IP and parks, that was the most revolting thing I've seen in a long time come out of like Disney PR. That was gross. I sure as heck hope he was reprimanded for that, because that was the absolute wrong way to represent yourself to the press when you're talking about Disney.
Yeah.
Hated it.
I mean, to give him the benefit of the doubt, I mean, I do get the sense that maybe he just spoke inartfully and said something he didn't mean to say, except that he has said a lot of things like that in settings where his comments were pre-scripted, right? So, I mean,
he absolutely meant what he said. I don't think there's any regret in what he said. I think what he said is not what he might regret is the tone he used.
Right. Well, I thought he looked flustered right after having said it.
Maybe. I really don't like that man. I think I think he won't get the position, and I think that'll cause him to leave the job. And if that's what happens, I say yay. But I'm very excited and interested to see what happens with Galaxy's Edge in Florida. I think that it may be completely different there. I don't know. What do you think?
Listen, I just hope that it's as easy to walk around Galaxy's Edge here as it apparently has been there. That's all I want as a selfish guest. You know, I just I want arm room when I walk around.
Easy is an understatement. I think they've used the app 2 days. 2 days since it's opened. Otherwise, it's open. Come on in and enjoy it. It's crazy. It's crazy. For years, people will be studying what happened at Disneyland with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge because it makes no sense. Yet something went terribly wrong.
Yeah,
it's wild.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, I know these are apples and oranges, but when the Disney Parks blog can announce that there's a new flavor of Dole Whip at the Polynesian walk-up counter, and the line like goes almost to the TTC, and then you get big wide open spaces in Galaxy's Edge, day 1, day 2, it's pretty shocking.
It's very weird. In any case, I think that does it for our Twilight Zone Tower of Terror conversation as we keep going on many, many tangents here. Do you have anything else you want to add about that attraction before we get to some trivia?
Let's do trivia.
Okay, I think that means it's trivia time! All right, Aaron, do you want to hit me with the trivia question first, or shall I hit you?
You hit me first this time.
Okay, so we were talking about this free fall attraction, the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, but this was not actually the first attempt at a free fall attraction that Walt Disney Imagineering thought of. And so I'm curious if you know what park it was going to go into, what land, and possibly the name of the attraction that they were working on.
Okay, I do know this. It's Geyser something, right? Geyser Point, Geyser Peak, Geyser Mountain.
Mountain. There you go. Geyser Mountain.
And I think it was going to go in Frontierland, and I want to say Disneyland Paris.
Ding, ding, ding. Yes. Wow, you nailed that right on the head.
Got it.
Very good. Very, very good.
Wow, that would have been another Disney mountain, you know?
Yeah.
Because Disney Paris doesn't have a mountain all its own, and they would have had one. That would have been cool.
What could have been, right? What could have been.
What could have been.
It's not attached to an IP, so forget it.
True.
What's your trivia question for me?
Okay, so the footage of Rod Serling used in the attraction comes from an episode of The Twilight Zone called, what is it called? It's a Good Life.
Oh, I thought that was going to be the trivia question. I was like, I couldn't think of it either. It's a Good Life. Okay.
Okay, so that footage comes from the beginning of that episode, but the elevator that we see behind him in the attraction, that's been digitally superimposed. So, in the episode, originally, what was he standing in front of?
Oh, gosh, an airplane.
No. Oh, that's a good guess, though. I could see that. No. You want to know, or you want to hint?
Let me think. Is it related to the title It's a Good Life in any way, shape, or form?
No.
A casket.
Think classroom, think geography.
A map of the world?
Yeah, a map of America. Yeah. There you go.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen that episode. Twilight Zone is a series that I do want to go and watch every episode. I haven't seen every episode. I've seen a good chunk of them, and I really do enjoy it. And I even watched some of the reboots back in the early 2000s. I have not seen this new one because CBS stupidly put it on their streaming service, which you have to pay for, and I'm not going to for that. Sorry. I think that really hurt that series. Have you seen the Jordan Peele one at all?
I haven't, really for the same reason. Also, I did subscribe to CBS All Access briefly. Very bad, user experience on that app, so I unsubscribed. But yeah, I've heard mixed reviews.
Good trivia. I didn't know that one. I got to go check it out, though.
Bonus trivia fact related to that. Didn't really lend itself to a question, but so the opening narration from that episode appears in a Michael Jackson song. And
really?
Yeah, there's a Michael Jackson song on his last album released during his lifetime. The album's called Invincible. The song is called Threatened. And, Michael Jackson, lifelong diehard Disney Parks fan. And reportedly, this narration made its way into the song because he loved Tower of Terror.
Wow.
And yeah, it's there in the song.
That is a super fun fact. I had never heard that. Interesting. Nor have I heard the song, I don't think. I need to listen to that song now.
Really good album. That's like the Michael Jackson album no one bought because it came out at during a questionable chapter in his life. But like musically, It is a very good album.
Interesting. Well, you'd know, wouldn't you? In any case, guys, if you enjoyed this episode about the Tower of Terror, you may want to check out episode 422 of Disney Coast to Coast, where I interviewed Mark Silverman, the voice of Rod Serling in the attraction. I've actually done quite a few Tower of Terror episodes, so if you just search Tower of Terror over at DisneyCoastToCoast.com, you should be able to find out some more stuff there. But Aaron, why don't you let folks know where they can find you?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Aaron Wallace or on the web. My website is AaronWallaceOnline.com.
Fantastic. And I suggest y'all do that because Aaron is awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Yeah, of course.
You're pretty awesome.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. Oh, thank you. Wow, look at this. We're just complimenting each other now. I will see you in a few weeks at the D23 Expo, sir. Great. Have a good one. Thanks for coming on the show.
You too. Bye-bye.
Now, folks, if you've ever thought about starting your own podcast, head to youcanpodcastnow.net for some free information to help you get started. That's youcanpodcastnow.net. I also want to give a shout out to my patrons Philip, Rio, Monet, Anna, Diego, James, Gerardo, Jared, Matt, and Jeffrey. If you'd like to become a member of the DCTC community like these fabulous folks, plus get behind-the-scenes access, Q&A live streams, early episode releases, and you could even be a guest on Trivia Time, and so much more, it all starts for just $1 over at patreon.com/DisneyCTC. That's patreon.com/DIZNEYCTC. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com.